Red Rising is the first in the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown, and kind of like with the last video we did, this is an entirely new thing to me. My friend Jonathan here suggested I read this, and I'm actually now halfway through the second book, Golden Sun, but we thought we'd get together and we'd make a video about Red Rising, the first in this series. How did you hear about the series?
So I actually, like, through video games and stuff, I knew this person for, like, several years, and we were kind of just playing separately, but at the same time one night, and I can't remember, like, how she originally suggested, but I somehow asked her, like, about a good book series. I was like, I want to find a new series that's really good, because, you know, I read, like, Harry Potter, and I was like, oh, that was a really good series, and I wanted something like that, but I've never gone out and looked or researched what a good book series was, so I was just kind of asking her. I don't remember how it came up, but she suggested The Blade Itself. So I read those books, and they were really good, and I finished them. I was like, hey, do you know any other good book series? And she suggested this one. So she's like my go-to for suggesting books, because I guess we have similar styles and stuff. So
it's a really good series. I probably should preface it by saying this is not like a Christian book series or anything. Some of the other videos that I do on this channel are theological reviews, theological breakdowns. This is definitely not a Christian book series or anything. It does deal with some themes that I think are interesting to consider from a theological perspective, but that's basically how I view everything. And so basically, no matter what I watch, if it's a movie, book, whatever, I'm going to look at it from that perspective. But it's not a Christian series, but it is a very interesting series. And I've been listening to it on audio, but because I'm a nerd or something, I don't know. I always like having a hard copy book as well. But I have actually been blasting through this. I've been listening to it while I run. I've been listening to it while I'm doing homework that doesn't take much attention. And I've been listening to it while I've been preparing people's Christmas gifts.
Nice.
So I've actually been just going through these pretty quickly. But I did not actually take any notes about this or anything. Jonathan here is the one who's going to kind of lead us through whatever we're talking about today, because he's the one with the notes. And so, Jonathan, just take over.
Yeah, so originally I suggested both the book series I mentioned. I had suggested both, and he's kind of like, which one do you think I would like? Because I'm only going to read one. So I thought about it, and he wanted a book with romance in it.
Absolutely.
So,
you got to have romance.
The other one doesn't really have that aspect, so I was like, I think this one does, because we see that with the main character and Mustang. And also, like, they're gold, so it kind of reminded me of, like, Superman, because they're kind of like superhumans, so I knew you'd like it because of that. And it has a bunch of, like, Greek kind of themes to it. So it sounded like a book you'd be more interested in than the other one, so that's originally why I had suggested.
Yeah, and I think it was a good choice, because there's a lot of historical background and stuff in there, you know, to where I really like mythology, I like all that stuff, and so you have the history, you got the theology, and you also have traces of other book series that I read as a young adult, you know, so you got like the kind of Harry Potter influence, Hunger Games influence, Percy Jackson, you get some of that. There's literally 12 houses named after the gods. It was actually very interesting. I really liked the series, and I thought you did a good choice, but obviously it had to have romance. If there's no romance, what's the point of even reading the book?
I also found the book had a lot of, like, one of the things like Game of Thrones is known for, why people liked it, is because the author makes some bold choices and, like, killing off characters that are important or plot twists, and those are the kind of things I really like in a book or a movie. Something that defies your expectations for what was going to happen in a big way.
Especially whenever they put in the effort to actually define that character and give them more than just a bland characterization.
Right.
And you have that a lot, especially like in the first book. You have it in the second one as well, where I'm at right now. You have a lot of these characters who you've actually gotten to know and care for, and you don't see it coming, and then they're just like killed. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, but real quick, summarize the plot for us, just so that if somebody is watching this and they are totally unfamiliar with this series, like, just tell them what's it about.
Okay, I'll just try and do succinctly. You can probably find a much better one online, but
if you want to listen to us,
you're
going to find the best one right here.
And I'll give it to you now without any spoilers, so if this is a book you're interested in reading, you can just stop the video after this and go read it.
And then come back to this video and watch the rest.
We're probably going to get into a lot of, like, specific details that are going to spoil it, so just keep that in mind. But so it's basically about this. It's based on our Earth. It's just way in the future. I don't remember the exact year it takes place, but we have advanced to the stage where we've explored the entire galaxy, and humans are living on every single planet for the most part, and the moons and all that. And they've kind of have a class system set up. So you have, like, these ruling golds. And then they have all these other colors that they've designated to be kind of like their slaves. Like, they do everything for them, and the gold's only purpose on on the planets is to rule. Like, they go to school to learn how to rule better. And everything else, like science and medicine and everything else that's not involved in being a ruler, is designated to other colors. And so the story takes place with the main character is a red, which is like the lowest class, and they're miners. They harvest. And so he finds out a truth about his life, that the golds are controlling and pretty much enslaving the other colors for their own purposes.
Turns out his entire worldview has been a lie.
Right.
That's basically...
And so once he discovers this, he feels obligated to join this resistance, and his goal is to have a red rising that will take down this gold society that has enslaved the rest of humanity.
The name of the book.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's basically as far as I can go without giving too many spoilers. But it's a great book. I had read Hunger Games, and Hunger Games is cool. And we see some aspects of Hunger Games because of the class type system, the ruling class, and because of some of the plots that happen in the story.
Well, and the vast difference between, like, especially, like, in Hunger Games, you got Katniss, who's, like, in District 12 or whatever, and that's, like, the lowest one.
Yeah, and each district does, like, different things. Like, I forget what they are there, but it's basically the same as the colors. The colors do different things.
I like this a lot better than I liked Hunger Games.
I did, too. That's what I was going to say. Like, I think if you like Hunger Games, you're definitely going to like this way more, because I think it's way better. Sorry for all you fans that really enjoy Hunger Games. It's a good series also. You can kind of see these themes of other books going on.
Yeah, and that's not an issue. You know, some people, they might go into a book and they're going to notice, wow, there's similarities to Hunger Games, Percy Jackson, Star Wars, Star Trek, different things like that.
Yeah.
I don't have an issue with that, because, you know, if you go back to the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun, right? Everybody's going to pull from something, and I think that Pierce Brown, the author, I think he does a very good job in that. I think that he really takes some of the best aspects of these various different stories and brings them together in a very interesting way, and I actually really like it. I
think he did it in a unique enough way where it doesn't feel like you can see the similarities, but you don't feel like you're reading Hunger Games.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like its own unique book, which is important. And one thing I thought was really interesting is a lot of things about space and exploring other planets go into, like, aliens and other races being out there. This one didn't. So it's kind of like we explored and went out to find different resources to progress humanity. Like one big thing is helium-3, which is they use to, like, colonize all the other planets. I mean, aliens are cool to have in movies, but I thought that it was cool that it's just humans, and they've created different types of humans through genetic research and stuff. But they're all humans. So,
well, and now that you bring that up, really, we should probably give a spoiler warning here, because it's kind of hard to go forward with any more discussion without dipping into spoilers. Because very early on in the book, like Jonathan mentioned here, we got this main character named Darrow. He's a red. He's a slave at the bottom of the rung, and his entire life he's thought that his life's mission is to mine helium-3 so that future generations can one day terraform Mars so that it can be habitable by humans. Right? So he's wanting to get the core of the planet ready so that people can colonize.
Yes.
Well, through a string of events and stuff, his wife dies, he tries to kill himself, all these different things. He comes to realize that apparently the planet had been terraformed hundreds of years earlier, and that the golds and all the other colors had really been lying to them.
And they'd already terraformed all the other planets as well, not just Mars.
So it wasn't just Mars. Now they're living, like, the only ones they're not living on are, like, the gas giants and stuff like that, right? But they're living on the moons, they're living on Mars, they're living everywhere. And so he comes to realize this, and he realizes that they have been slaves. And at the beginning of the book, he realizes he's a slave, but he doesn't have much of an issue with it, because he thinks, you know what? Somebody needs to do the job. We're preparing it for future generations.
Yeah, so they kind of gave them, they feel like they have a purpose. They don't feel like they're slaves because they're doing it for future generations.
Yeah, but then he realizes, oh no, we're not doing this for future generations. They are planning on keeping us here forever.
This is, we're slaves to do this specific task, and they're lying to us to keep us doing this.
Yeah, and so that's the motivator that gets him out there and leads to this red rising.
Yeah.
Right? To where it ends up, what happens is, after he tries to kill himself, they actually drug him so that he doesn't die, and then he wakes up, and they go, and what they do is they carve him into a gold. Because technology is so advanced that basically they can, like, just trade out body parts and just change his entire appearance so that, you know, his soul and his mind, and he still thinks like Darrow the Red from Mars, but now he has this appearance of Darrow Andromedus, who is, just this hulking figure with golden hair and stuff like that. So that now he appears like a member of the highest caste of society while still thinking like the person from the lowest.
Yeah.
And then he's like, he goes through like a few months of just prep to where he learns their history. He learns things. He adapts so that he can go off to this institute where the highest of the golds are competing to become the best leader they can possibly be.
Yeah, so since we're talking about like the society, I wrote down all the colors. So there's, like I said, there's kind of like a caste system. So they have like the low colors, the mid colors, and then the high colors. So the lowest color is the reds, which is what Darrow is, our main character. So the reds are like harvesters. They do like the gritty, dangerous jobs.
And hell divers.
Yeah, and they think they're really cool. They are really cool, but like they're considered the lowest in all of society.
But amongst the group, they think they're real cool.
Yeah.
So what other colors we got?
So we got pink. The pinks are like for pleasure, obviously. Satisfy lust and anything that golds would want.
And as you would expect, you see them getting abused a lot.
Yeah.
And mistreated and stuff like that, as
The golds consider them kind of less than human, so
they treat them like objects.
They treat them like objects, and they don't care. Like they can literally kill them, and you get like a fine. You don't get a serious punishment. That's just like why'd you do that, man? Come on. You can beat them, but don't kill them. And then we have the obsidians. Obsidians are
those are the big ones, right?
Yeah, they're really like brutes. They're specifically bred for war and protecting, and they usually have them in their armies and stuff. They're kind of like Vikings.
Okay, yeah. I can see that.
They grow up with that kind of idea and mentality. And then they have the browns, and the browns are basically servants, like what you would think of as a butler. So anything a butler would do, like cooking, just serving in any capacity, like at a business or in a home. Those are what the browns do.
Because they get dirty. It's brown.
So those are all the low colors. And then we get the mid colors. So mid colors, you have gray, and gray are like the police officers or the enforcers of the law. There's orange. Orange are mechanics. Green is like Bill Gates. Okay. They're technology creators. That's their purpose, is to advance technology and create new things. Violets they're kind of like the greens, but they're specifically like the creative version of it. So they're like the artist and artistic. And they're most commonly referenced as for the carving. And carving is when they manipulate the body to enhance it or just add aesthetics things to it. Like some of them add wings to people or horns or just make you look different or whatever you want to look like.
It's how Darrow goes from being a red to being a gold. Like they have to take limbs off and add other
or just really skin graft or add you can do whatever. This is in the future, so
very advanced technology.
They've gotten to a point where they can make you look. They can literally give you a shark head if you want. And then we have the yellows, who they're like the doctors. Or any natural science like that, but primarily that's what they're used for, is for medical purposes. We have the blues. The blues are very like robotic. They're humans, but I think they have a lot of augmentations and stuff that basically makes them like half robot. And they're very analytical thinking. They don't have a lot of emotion.
Yeah, very dry personality.
Yeah, and they're used for piloting. So they pilot all the ships they have in space for wars. They're mostly used in like their militaries to guide through the star systems and stuff like that. And then we have the whites, which whites are like priests, but in this book, at least for the golds, they don't really have gods. They consider themselves the gods. So the whites, even though they're priests, they're more keeping the tradition of the golds.
I think it's good how the author does it. He doesn't just give you all the colors and say, like, these are what they all are. What he does is he slowly introduces you, right? You just start out with the reds. You get to understand who they are. You get to see who the golds are because they come down and visit.
Yeah.
And then once Darrow, you kind of get to experience this with Darrow. As he learns, you're learning. That's a classic. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Whenever you're writing a story, it's like the hero's journey.
It's really funny because I prefer reading artificial history and things like that more than I do regular history.
I think it's also interesting when it comes to just social commentary.
Yeah.
The way that even Darrow views it at the beginning of the book is that they're all kind of just content with how things are. Even whenever, like I mentioned this earlier, how his wife comes up to him and is saying, hey, but we could do something more. You could lead a rebellion. And he's like, but why? I mean, things are the way they are. And people have kind of just adapted to this. And it kind of takes, Darrow, really, his main motivator to lead this rebellion is vengeance. Which, I personally don't agree with. But you do see how sometimes there's key motivators that force people to think differently. And until you have that, people will kind of just take things the way they are and just almost leave them that way. Like, there comes this point where sometimes we just view things as like, no, that's the way things are. We're just gonna roll with it. It's not ideal, but that's fine.
Well, and it applies because it's like people will believe a lie and not question it if it's comfortable.
Yeah, like they're like ostriches, like put their head in the sand. I mean, ostriches don't actually do that, but, you know, it's a phrase. Sometimes we're afraid of things that we don't understand.
No.
That's like a line in one of the songs in Beauty and the Beast. Okay. So the whites are the priest, you said.
Yeah.
And then who goes above that?
So I think next would be coppers, and coppers are like the government, kind of. They're like bureaucrats. They kind of run public affair type things. They're obviously not the rulers, because the golds are the rulers, but they kind of take care of like judging people for crimes and small stuff. And they kind of run day to day. And then silvers are like the financial businessmen. They deal with money, and they're really good with manipulating money and business related things like that. And then of course the golds. And the golds are literally like when they go to school, and we'll see from this book, they don't go to school to learn whatever they want. Gold's purpose is to rule, and so they learn how to manipulate and rule through logic and force. So they're about using their power to keep everything in control, the way that they have set it up.
Based on who you are now, what color would you be?
I think that... Oh man, that's so hard, because I don't know if he had addressed as like engineers. I think that violet...
Jonathan's an engineer, by the way.
I'm an engineer. I do like roadway design, so obviously that's not directly addressed, but they do have like the creative minds, which are the violets. Those are more like carvers. So they're kind of like a mix of medical and technology. And then they have the greens, who are technology, but I think I'd be more green because I'm less of the creative side of stuff. That's what I would be considered.
Okay, so now which one would you want to be?
Well,
gold.
It's so hard. It's hard to say because, you know, you want to be like, living on top, the gold. But then you also know how terrible the society is. It's kind of like one of those things where, like, you wish you were just born into. It's like, you're not... I mean, I didn't do anything. I was just born gold. So
I mean, let's be honest. If you're sitting here watching a video on YouTube in your free time, you're probably a gold. I mean, most likely, I mean, that's where we would kind of fall. So be grateful for what you have. There's just a little quick sermon. 10-second sermons with David. But yeah, so what would you want to be?
Yeah, it's just so hard not to say gold because all the others have it so terrible.
Well, I guess I would be a white. Mainly because you said that I don't know anything about whites, but those are the priestly class.
Yeah, they kind of keep the tradition. Like I said, they're like the religious figures, but since they don't have...
Yeah, they don't really have religion in
their religion as themselves. Their gold culture and their gold traditions, so they kind of keep those gold traditions. Okay,
well, in this society, I guess I'd be a white, because I mean, I work at a church and stuff. But if I wasn't white, I'd probably go with violet, just because I like a bunch of creative stuff, and... basically a lot, like, I just have more of like a creative type mind. Yeah. So it'd probably be in that area.
That would be pretty cool because we see like Mickey in the book.
Well, that being said, let's actually talk about the story.
Okay.
So far, this video is probably going to be longer than future videos we do on the series, mainly because we're just, I don't know, just talking about the society and the structure of all of it, whereas in future ones we'll probably just talk about the story and stuff. But
right, yeah, we won't go back over all this. So the book starts out with Darrow. We've kind of already talked about at the beginning, but we learn his dad sang a song and kind of he kind of tried to start some kind of resistance or something, and he died because of it. So
and that was when Darrow was younger.
Yeah,
Darrow's only like 16 or 17.
Yeah, so they marry pretty young. I think it's because in Red Society they have very rough jobs, so they don't live very long. Yeah. They die younger. So the way they have the system set up is there's different groups in Low Reds, I guess. The main one is Lambda. I think that's the name of it. So they're Lambda. And the other one that they fight against that always wins the laurel, which is the prize that you win if you get the most helium-3, is Gamma.
And named after the Greek letters. The alphabet. Yeah.
Darrow's main goal in the beginning is to win the laurel finally and beat Gamma. Yeah, and in the beginning of the book, it kind of talks about Helldivers and what they are. They're like the people who get in these big claw drills and actually dig out the helium-3. So they're kind of considered the most important in that society because they do the most dangerous job, and they're kind of like the leader. They're the bravest.
They're the ones who can win the laurel, and if you win the laurel, you get more food. You
get all kinds of stuff.
You're supposed to get more food.
You get more food and supplies and like things that like he doesn't know what like cinnamon is and honey and like all these things that we consider normal. These are all like very high quality
novelties,
things like you don't eat normally. I think they talk about eating like a blood soup or something.
Yeah, it's really nasty.
So
Sounds
that's
really
the kind of food they have to live on.
Yeah, and so the book opens up. Darrow, he is doing his hell diving stuff. He dives down. He goes out of his way to win the laurel, right? He puts his life at stake and everything, but then he gets cheated, and the other group ends up winning it despite his efforts.
Yes.
And so he gets upset by this, and his wife, seeking to comfort him, goes and shows him a secret room, or the secret area.
Yeah, I think they think it's like the outside world. So they go out and this like, hey, this is what's outside our world. Like we're being lied to, like this.
Because like we said, they live in mines. They're like under the ground. And so she takes him to this area which they consider to be the outside world. And, you see grass and you see stars and stuff. And he's like, wow.
They've never seen
this is crazy. Before. And she's saying, look, there's stuff they're lying to us about. She has no idea how extreme that lie goes. She just says, hey, there's an issue here. They're lying to us. They've already figured out how to terraform some of this stuff, at least. Like, we can have
They've already started the process. Because they believe that it hadn't even started. They were just collecting for it to start. So she's like, hey, they've already started doing this terraforming.
Yeah, and then he just says, hey, you know what? Like, that's just how things are. We'll just get over it. It'll be fine. But then she says, Darrow, like, you could be a leader. You could start something. We need to dream for more. And he says, no, I'm not going to do it. Well, what happens is that as they're leaving, some people come across them, arrest them, and they're in jail for a few days. And ultimately, Io, she's going to end up being killed. She's going to be hung, and the way it is that due to the gravity being lesser on Mars, whenever a person's hung, it's just enough to like put them in severe pain for long enough to where their death is long and like it's almost like crucifixion where it's just long and excruciating, and so their loved ones typically end up being the ones to actually tug them down so that they
break their neck,
break their neck and die quicker.
It's very cruel,
very cruel, very messed up. Io ends up dying, but right before she dies, she sings this song, the same song that his dad had sung before he died. But when Io sings it, basically she becomes this just rock star, because these people called the Sons of Ares, which is kind of like this terrorist organization already trying to start a rebellion, they hack into the system, they get a control of the feed, and they spread this out, and they broadcast it throughout everywhere, so that everybody hears Io singing this song, and it kind of plants the seeds of rebellion to where she becomes famous, and she's known as Persephone. Yeah. Right? So, which once again, go with Greek mythology.
I forgot, I don't really remember what that, I guess you have to know mythology.
Yeah, we could go into it, but that'd just make it long. But,
do you know what the song, so the song's important because it talks about the Reaper, which comes into play later, but do you know what the song, because I never really understood also why the song was something that was punishable by death.
So the reason why it was punishable by death is mainly just because if you listen to the lyrics, it's saying you can dream of a better tomorrow.
Okay.
Like basically, like when you analyze the lyrics and just listen to them, it's not so overt that it's, just saying, hey, let's rise up against the society and rebel against them. But what it's doing is it's encouraging people to think for themselves and think like, what if things could be better?
They want them to think within the society they set up for them. They don't want them to ever think outside of that. So.
Yeah, and that's Io's whole thing. She tells Darrow, like, you need to dream. You need to think bigger.
Right.
And so when Io dies, that basically just crushes Darrow, and he goes and buries her. And ultimately that leads to that's a thing punishable by death as well.
Oh yeah, so the way they do it is they leave them hanging as a display as you don't defy us.
Once again, like crucifixion.
And then another important part in there is when she gets hung, the governor, is he the governor?
Nero, arch governor.
Actually comes himself and says she's going to be hung.
He's a gold.
So he's present there. This is an important plot point because he attributes Io's death to golds in general, but specifically to this man Nero.
Yeah. And ultimately, through a long series of events, he buries his wife and stuff, and ultimately Darrow just wants to commit suicide.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's doing, and he basically, through burying his wife, he does different things that ultimately lead to him also being hanged. And right as he's about to die, he realizes this was a mistake. He was basically having a big pity party and was thinking, oh, poor pitiful me, my wife's dead, yada, yada, yada. I say that so bluntly. I mean, that is sad. That's really sad. Yeah. But he realizes he was focusing on himself, but literally, as he's processing this, he's thinking, oh my gosh, wow, like, I should actually, the best thing I can do to honor my wife is to go fulfill her dream. Mm-hmm. She said to dream bigger, I should try to do that. Mm-hmm. But as he's thinking that, they hang him.
He dies.
Yeah, but prior to that, his uncle had actually drugged him by giving him this drink. he didn't realize it, right? He drank it, and it actually made him pass out quicker, so that he appeared dead earlier, and so they were able to take him off and bury him.
Yeah, and his uncle is the one that goes up and supposedly pulls his feet. So you could kind of...
He just doesn't tug.
It's illusion that they killed Darrow.
Yeah, and so Darrow wakes up, and he's like, how am I not dead? And it's like really crazy. And basically these people called, the Sons of Ares, that group, they come and pick him up, and they say, dude, we're about to blow your mind. And so they take him, and they take him up this elevator. And, like, for the first time, he gets to see, like, sunlight. Yeah. And I remember when I got to this, throughout the whole reading of the first book, I was just texting Jonathan just, like, my emoji reviews. And, I texted you at this point because Darrow, like, looks, and he sees grass, and he sees trees, and he sees buildings. And he's like, what is this? And they're like, dude, they've been lying to you this entire time.
Yeah.
You've thought that you've been planning things and preparing things for your future generations. They terraformed not only Mars, but all the other planets and stuff generations ago. So they're just feeding you this lie to keep you where you're at. And so now Darrow, he's getting mad. And he's like, oh, this is messed up.
Yeah, because previously he was like, no, I don't want to do anything. Like, what we have here is fine. I don't need to lead a resistance. So...
he was satisfied with where he was at. Like, I mean, he didn't like it, but he was like, you know what? That's just our lot in life. I'm a slave. I'll be a slave. Maybe one day my kids will have something better.
Right. And he actually has this revelation that the whole time they've been underground. So even the grass field that Io took him to before was underground. It was terraformed underground. So they've been living underground this whole time, not even on the surface. Yeah. So when he actually goes up, he sees the real outside world. And so
the one shimmer of hope that he had has now been dashed. Because he at least thought his future generations might prosper, and he realizes, no, there's no chance if things stay the way they are.
Yeah, and on the surface, there's golds living there, and there's even other reds that are considered higher than, which are the high reds. And so you can imagine the emotions and feelings he's had seeing that.
And so ultimately what happens is that he ends up getting with the Sons of Ares, and he says, okay, fine. Like, I will be the person y'all need me to be. And so they end up handing him over to this guy named Mickey, who is a violet, and Mickey is a carver.
Which he's a violet.
And and so he starts carving him up, and next thing you know, this is over the course of, like, chapters and stuff like that, right? Yeah, and so eventually he becomes a gold. And then they train him up, they do all these things, and now he has to go take a test to see if he can make it into the Institute, which is basically the school for all the elite of the elite golds.
So that's how you become a peerless Scard.
Yes, yeah. Because peerless Scard is basically, that's the ultimate goal, and the Sons of Ares, they think if you can become a peerless Scard, maybe they can put you in command of a fleet, and then you can have enough manpower to actually lead a rebellion.
Yeah, so his goal, their goal, the Sons of Ares, and the leader of the group he meets, which is Dancer, their idea is that they're going to make him a gold, and he's going to kind of infiltrate from the inside.
Yeah, so he's like a double agent. It's kind of, that's what I liked. Yeah. Not only is it sci-fi, not only is it a little bit of fantasy, but it's also like a kind of spy espionage thing.
Yeah.
And you've got that looming secret where he's a red, now he looks like a gold, and not only is he trying to infiltrate the golds, he's trying to become the best of the best golds. So he goes and takes this test, and he ends up only missing one question.
Yeah.
Which puts him, that just shows that he already was actually pretty advanced.
One cool thing that we didn't talk about that I did want to briefly is the test that Dancer gives him before he accepts him for the mission.
That. It's like the card?
Yeah, he has the two cards, and both cards have the same thing on them, but he doesn't tell Darrow that, and he says, hey, pick the one. I think one has a scythe on it, like a reaper.
Yeah.
And then one has a flower or something. But they both have the scythe on them, right? So he realizes this, and he picks the card, and he's like, I know this is going to be scythe because they're both that. And he eats it. He puts it in his mouth, and he's like, I picked the right one. I think it is important because he's trying to test if he's as clever as a gold, or at least a little bit. Because he could have just... some thoughts you could have is like, I'm just going to leave it up to luck. Maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. And that's why they chose him for this. Because they know even though he's a hell diver, he's, this kind of... You would seem like he's just a red, kind of brutish guy, But he is intelligent, and that was important for their mission.
Yeah. Rebellions aren't only won by charisma and brute. They're also won by, cleverness. And you actually have to be able to do this. And so that's how they pick him. He becomes a gold. He goes to the Institute because he passes the test with flying colors. He's one of the leaders when it comes to that. And now he's on his way to the Institute. And they have this thing where it's kind of like, I guess, the final test before the Institute. And so they're captured in the middle of the night. They're stripped of their clothes. And they're put naked into a room with only one other person. And Darrow happens to be in a room with a certain friend of his brother. Because Darrow, prior to this, he's had some interactions with some different golds. And certain ones, he's realizing, you know what, they're not that bad. There's one guy named Cassius that Darrow kind of was like, you know what, you're an alright guy. I mean, obviously, he doesn't like any of these people, but he realizes, you know what, like, they're more just a product of a failed system.
He meets Cassius, and I think he doesn't necessarily like him.
Not at first.
But he also learns that he is Nero's son.
Well, not Nero's son. He's a Bologna.
Sorry, he's a Bologna. But he knows Bolognas are, like, this high class. And so he's like, if I become friends with him, this will give me a way in. So
his father is the leader of a fleet.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he realizes, okay, I need to be friends with this Cassius guy. And over time, he does end up kind of coming to like Cassius. But he realizes early on, okay, this guy, I need to suck up to him. He's from the Bologna family. I need him. Well, whenever he's taken to this passage thing, and he's in this room, it's dark. And he sees that the other person put in there with him is Julian, which is Cassius's twin brother. And basically, they have to fight to the death.
Yeah.
Because basically what happens is, even amongst the golds, it's kind of survival of the fittest thing. Like, you think it's all sunshine and rainbows for the golds, but you actually come to see it's not exactly that way. Yes, they have it better than most, but even amongst them, they're kind of just treated as worthless until they've proven themselves.
Well, they want the best of the best to be the Peerless Guard.
Yes,
and
yeah.
they have, like, that test, and some people scored really low, but they still get in, I guess. And so, and then if you're weak physically, like, they want to root out those weaker classes.
Yeah.
They actually call them bronzes. So bronzes are like lowborn or weaker or less intelligent. So they're trying to weed out these lower class people. So in the passage, they're putting like really strong people against really weak people to weed them out.
Yeah, and you don't realize that at first. At first, you just think that it's supposed to be like an evenly matched thing. And then you realize, no, this was fixed because there's actually a bias.
Yeah.
They're not just trying to produce the best of the best golds. They're trying to do the best of the best golds that they personally like. And so that's why there's this one character named Severo. I really like Severo. He kind of reminds me of Severus Snape. So I thought it was interesting that they have similar names. Yeah. So he reminds me of Severus Snape from Harry Potter. So his name's Severo.
I never even thought about that.
And he actually is an outlier. Like, he ends up winning despite the fact that the odds were against him.
He's kind of a bronze, like I said. Yeah. He's smaller. They would consider him weak. So.
Yeah. But basically, they have to fight to the death. And Julian, Darrow at this point, he actually likes Julian a lot more than he likes Cassius.
Yeah, Julian's like a really nice guy.
He's like innocent.
He's someone you would want to be friends with.
Yeah.
But he's not a warrior. He's not strong and like he's not like Cassius.
Yeah, and so right here is a really tough moment for Darrow. I remember I was actually running whenever I heard this scene. I was like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
I remember right where I was at because I was like, oh, this is so hard because Darrow, he doesn't want to kill this guy. He actually, like, of all the golds, this is the one he's come to like the most because he just seems the most innocent. Yeah. Yes, he's a gold, but he's a nice guy. And he knows that if they fight, Julian stands no chance against him. Like, he just knows that. But he also keeps in mind, he thinks about Io. He thinks about the fact that if he dies right now, then all this has been in vain, and future generations are going to be stuck in the system.
Yeah.
And so he does it, and he kills Julian, and then he just sits down and sobs. And in doing that, he gained the rite of passage to actually go to the Institute.
Right.
But now you have this looming secret, because when they get out, all the victors are waiting for the other victors to show up, and he's sitting there with Cassius. And Cassius is just waiting for Julian.
Yeah, and Cassius is actually really excited. Like, he enjoyed that. He enjoyed killing someone, and he wants to know who everyone killed. And no one else really wants to, because they're just like, it's terrible that everyone just was forced to kill someone else or be killed. So,
and as more people show up, you get to see that Cassius's motives change. At first, he's just excited to be like, who'd you kill? Who'd you kill? But then as Julian isn't showing up, he's saying...
He's trying to figure out who's
He's like, okay, who'd y'all kill?
Yeah.
And then, because he realizes Julian's dead. And he has a real tough time. He's like weeping and stuff about it in the days that follow. But Darrow, obviously, he's not going to tell him because he's saying, I need to be on this guy's right hand. Like, I don't care. Like, obviously, I had no choice. But, so the story moves on and they finally go to the Institute. They're picked, they're in House Mars, him and Cassius and stuff like that. There's different houses all named after the Roman gods, right? Yeah, Roman gods. They each have their own castles. And basically, this is where it becomes a lot like Hunger Games. Because basically you have this entire arena where it's much bigger than Hunger Games, as in like these places are like miles and miles apart from one another and in different types of terrains and stuff. And each house has their own castle. They each have their own standard, their own flag, kind of like, once again, the Romans.
Each team has a proctor, which is, they're all peerless.
And these are people sitting on Mount Olympus who like look over them and like watching.
And then they have their floating.
They describe it like a mountain.
It's like, it basically has everything they want to just have a good time and just watch kids fight each other.
Very much like Hunger Games, where it's like they have eyes on people at all time. They can move around and they can watch.
And they can control things. They can control whether a medic goes in and helps someone or they send them things to help them.
Yeah.
And the proctors are supposed to help their own team. So our proctor is Fitchner.
Yep.
So he's a character.
Yeah.
So we'll see him show up, but Fitchner basically explains the game, and they're like, "Oh, well, this is basically like capture the flag." And so
much more, a very extreme version to capture the flag, but
they're also told like, "Hey, you don't kill each other. Like you can fight and injure each other, but there's med pods that will come, but we're not supposed to just kill each other."
Yeah.
And I think they find out that that's not actually true. That they're a little bit lenient on things, and there's actually some other stuff going on behind the scenes. And their goal is to capture all the other teams' flags, and then they win.
Yeah, and very quickly, Darrow and Cassius prove themselves to kind of be the leaders.
So one of the things you do as each house has is what's called a primus, and so you're kind of you're not fighting each other, but you're trying to one-up each other to become primus, to become leader of your group. And all of the purpose of this is so when you graduate from the Institute, the better you look there, the higher chance you have of getting a really high position, such as a praetor or something.
Yeah, you get scholarships to go on to a place called the Academy.
Yeah.
Or just you get different positions in different places depending on how well you do in this game, because people are watching.
And obviously this is very important to Darrow because he wants to get as high as he can because he's trying to rise in society to beat them from the inside out. Yeah. So a lot of his motivation, like it's not things he wants to do, but he knows he needs to do it as part of his mission because that's his whole purpose.
Yeah. And so him and Cassius, they're kind of becoming the leaders. There's some tension there, and Mars themselves, they actually split into multiple different camps, right? So you got this guy named Titus, who he's leading a camp, and then Severo, he just goes off on his own.
Severo kind of goes on. They don't know what he does. They just hear like howling and stuff.
Yeah, he's kind of a weird guy.
So he's often referred to as kind of like a wolf or something. Yeah. He's kind of a strange character.
And then really, to just kind of summarize a bunch of this, basically the story becomes a bunch of political intrigue and like battle strategy and stuff as Darrow learns more and more about how to become a leader and all these different things, like how he's going to actually conduct society. There's one point where they capture Titus, who was one of the House Mars people, and he's been treating people very badly.
Yeah, he's been like raping women and making people slave and just being like very cruel.
Yeah, and so Darrow, he realizes, like, people are finally viewing Darrow as like the leader of the group.
Yeah.
And Darrow realizes there has to be some sort of justice. We can't, like, as the leader, I cannot allow
him to just go free.
Yeah, he can't, like, he's been doing terrible things, and so he decides to kill him. But shortly before this, he notices something in how Titus speaks. So there's some colloquialism that is unique to Reds.
The way you curse, the specific,
Yeah, and Titus says it, and Darrow almost misses it, but then he realizes, I think Titus is a Red.
Yeah, and he also tells the story that's like, I'm doing it for her. And he's realizing, like, the reason he's doing all this to the Golds, like raping them and not caring, is because he's actually Red. He doesn't actually care. He hates the Golds, so he justifies his actions towards them because of everything they've done to him and his family.
Yeah,
so it's like revenge for him.
Yes.
So that kind of reflects what Darrow's going through.
Yeah, and so in this moment, Darrow's realizing, okay, I don't want to become like Titus, and I don't want to be so fueled by hatred and vengeance that I become something vile like this.
Yeah.
I need to learn to do things in a different way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he still has to kill Titus.
Yeah, he can't.
Because he needs to enact
be
justice.
On the Gold side, and they're not going to support him if he lets Titus go.
Yeah, and so he has this real big trial where he realizes he has come to take out the Golds, yet one of the first people he's having to kill is a fellow Red. Fast forward a little bit, they start conquering more places, yada yada yada. There's this guy named Roke, and he's kind of into this girl named Leah, and through a bunch of different things that happen, there are still people in House Mars who are fighting against Darrow because they don't like Darrow's leadership. Yeah. And so one day there's this
other character called the Jackal that we haven't met, we just know of him. And the Jackal kind of, I think he offers something to people if they bring them Darrow.
Yeah, because Darrow, he's kind of built up this legacy for himself where he's known as the Reaper, because he always uses the Sai.
Yeah.
Which they think it's weird that he uses it, but he's used to using those from when he was a Red.
I think that Antonia, well, she hears this, so it's a good offer for her, because she's kind of just does whatever's best for her. I think this is after Titus.
Yes, I believe so.
Instead of Darrow killing Titus himself and doing the justice, he wants to give that to Cassius,
yes.
Because he's convinced Cassius that Titus was the one that killed Julian.
Yes.
Even though he's not. We know Darrow did.
Oh,
but he convinces him that Titus did it, so he lets Cassius kill Titus. But the problem is, if he's the leader, he should be taking the justice into his hands. And all his followers, like Rogue, tell him he should do that, but he doesn't.
Yeah, because if he did it, then he's doing it for justice, but by allowing Cassius to do it, he's allowing it to be done for vengeance.
Yeah. And so they kind of see the slip in Darrow's leadership, and I think this is one of the motivations for Antonia also. So Antonia
comes after Darrow, and they take out a guy named Roke, which we've already mentioned. They take Roke out to where he goes missing, but then they take one of Darrow's friends, Leah, who happens to be Roke's kind of girlfriend.
Yeah.
They take her captive to try to get Darrow to come out, and they have her by the throat and stuff like that. And Darrow, he knows that if he comes out, he'll be killed, and the whole thing will be over. So he doesn't come out, and Leah is killed. And so Roke, this is his first girlfriend to die.
Yeah.
Not to spoil anything for the second book, but this is the, so Leah dies. Darrow eventually comes back out and stuff like that, and Roke is still missing. Antonia goes away, and now it's just Darrow and Cassius trying to rebuild stuff up. One night, Cassius wakes Darrow up and says, "Hey, we found Roke." And so Darrow, he gets his stuff together. He's like, okay, I think they hop on horses, and they're, riding away. And then as they're riding, Darrow puts something together. He realizes, I think Cassius found out.
Yeah, well, before this, the Jackal had actually sent a messenger to give Cassius an item, and he says, "Hey, Cassius, give up Darrow." And he's like, "No, I'm not going to do that." But Darrow doesn't know what this item is that he gave him.
Yes.
But he thinks it has something to do with enlightening Cassius that he killed Julian.
Yeah.
And so he kind of works this out that Cassius has figured out that he killed Julian. And so he takes him out here, and he's going to duel him.
Long story short, Cassius ends up stabbing Darrow and leaving him to die.
Darrow has not had training with the blade much. He hasn't trained with weapons like Cassius. Cassius has trained his whole life.
Cassius is a really good fighter.
Yeah, he's trained his whole life. He grew up learning, and so he defeats Darrow.
Yeah, and he stabs him, leaves him to die. But then once again, Darrow doesn't die. For the second time, he finds that somebody's nurturing him to health. And we actually have a character here that we haven't mentioned yet. She's only showed up a few times earlier in the book, not very significant moments.
One of the significant moments is her house actually catches Darrow and Cassius at one point and forces them to go into the water. And they're like out there freezing, and so that's their interaction. So they've met her.
And there was one point whenever Darrow and Cassius, they took over her house, and whenever they took over her house, she was hiding away, and Darrow allowed her to live.
Darrow let her escape.
And so at that moment, she realized that he was a decent person who wasn't just out for vengeance, not just out for blood like everybody else.
Well, and that's kind of the reputation Darrow's been trying to build for himself.
Yeah. And so what happens is that this girl, her name is Virginia, but he calls her Mustang because I think there was this moment when he saw her riding.
That time when he forced them into the water, she was riding on a Mustang, and they didn't know her name. She wouldn't tell them, so they just called her Mustang. Yeah.
And so this girl named Mustang, she actually comes and saves Darrow whenever he's bleeding, and so he wakes up in a cave, and she's nurturing him back to health. And basically, over the next few weeks, we don't actually get a lot of their interactions, but over the next few weeks, they get to know each other, they talk a lot and stuff like that. And they have this kind of budding romance going on, this is the thing that sold me. This is the thing that, Jonathan told me, hey, there's a romance in this book. And I was like, here we go, finally. And, Darrow has conflicting emotions about it because he's like, well, like, my wife is dead. But then he also realizes, like, him and his wife, they were only married 6 months before she died. And he realizes, she's actually been dead longer than we were married. And he's got, like, these different conflicting things about it. But basically with Mustang, he says, I can't give my heart to her yet.
Yeah.
But I can't deny that there's something there that wasn't there before. I'm just going to keep quoting Beauty and the Beast in this video.
I think this is a very, very critical defining point in the book. Because one thing he realizes about her is she starts singing that song that Io sung. And he's like, why is she singing that? And so he very closely relates her to Io, his wife. And another really important thing is she changes Darrow's perspective
on how to rule.
Yeah, so this is going to define how he perceives his goal and what he wants to achieve. Because before it's just about vengeance and, I want to kill all the Golds. But she has this idea that, hey, we're not going to enslave people. We're not going to do what they have done to us. We're going to be better than that. We're going to stand for something more. And so that's where he starts seeing Io in her.
So she obviously doesn't have as lofty motivations as he does, because she doesn't realize the whole system needs to crumble.
Yeah.
But she realizes that what they're doing is wrong, even amongst the goals. She's like, we can't enslave people. We can't do that. Yeah. What you need to do is you need to get people to like you.
Yeah,
and that's the better form of leadership.
And she's not really condemning slavery, but she's saying, like, you shouldn't...
There's a better way.
They will follow you without you telling them they're a slave.
So this changes his perspective a whole lot. And then they spend a whole lot of time in this cave to where eventually it becomes winter time. She gets sick. He's healthy now, but now he's having to help save her life. And then he ends up interacting with Fitchner.
Again.
Fitchner is, once again, he's the proctor for House Mars. And he comes to deliver some medicine for Mustang because everybody's been watching them. Nobody else knows they're alive. Like, none of the... players necessarily know they're alive, but the proctors, they have eyes everywhere, everything. And they say people have been watching y'all, and they want to see what y'all are doing.
Yeah,
and so they want her to live, and they give some medicine.
And through Fitchner, he learns that there's actually 2 of the other houses that are kind of getting paid to support the Jackal. And I think it's at this point we learn the Jackal is the son of Nero.
Yes,
and so you're trying to get the Jackal to win. So the proctors are all helping the Jackal, or specifically these 2 other houses. So they're kind of against Darrow also. And
the reason he's called the Jackal is because at some point throughout the game he got so hungry that he ate
other players. People. So he's almost worse than how we saw Titus earlier.
Very vile person. Terrible. Very heartless.
So he finds out the proctors are helping. They also find out they have rings on that the proctors can listen to everything they're saying. So, and I think in this specific case, he puts down a jam field. They can't hear them.
Yeah, but also I think this is where he learns about the armor that they've got,
the pulse. The pulse armor. Important. He discovers how it works and its weakness.
Yeah, because Fitchner's got it on.
And I think in a process we have learned, but in this it's kind of even more clarified. Like the Bologna family and the Augustus family are kind of
don't like each other.
They're enemies.
Yes.
And so the reason Julian was put in against Darrow is because Nero was trying to get rid of his opponent's son. He was trying to get the Jackal to win, which was his son. And so he purposely put Julian against Darrow so he would die.
Yeah,
so
and he didn't really care about Darrow at the time, right? Yeah. He was like, okay, well, we know Darrow can take out Julian, and then we don't care if they kill Darrow later.
Yeah, because Darrow's a nobody.
Yeah, Darrow, he was from House Andromedus.
Yeah, they gave him a fake family, which was like no one knew, because they didn't want anyone to find out who Darrow, or investigate where he came from.
He insisted on keeping his same first name, though.
Yeah, he does.
Which people they're always like, Darrow, that's a
off-color
name. That's weird.
So we already see kind of this conflict between Bologna and Augustus, which is important throughout the series, but so that's why Julian went in there, because if Darrow kills him, then Darrow gets the blame for it, and who cares about Darrow? He's a nobody.
Yep. So Mustang and Darrow, they're getting together, they're planning what they're going to do.
They kind of go forward with this new philosophy that, hey, we're not going to enslave people, we're actually going to free them. They'll kind of be like our army, they'll follow us, but we won't treat them as slaves, we'll tell them they're free. So they start going, and
don't they find Severo?
The Howlers do show up at a certain point. So Severo has collected these other people from House Mars that follow
loyal, and they were still loyal to Darrow. Yeah, because they liked how Darrow led, and they trusted him as like a good person. Kind of like Severo and who they call them the Howlers. They saw in Darrow the same thing that Mustang saw, like the ability in him to be a good leader.
Yeah.
And so Mustang and Darrow, they end up reconnecting with the Howlers, right?
I think at some point, it's fuzzy. Basically, they go forward with this new strategy that they're not going to enslave people, they're actually going to free them. So they get people, they say, hey, if you do this, you help us with this, we'll free you. And then from that freedom, they become loyal and join them. And eventually, they end up going back to Mars and taking it back. Cassius has taken Primus because everyone thinks Darrow's dead. And Cassius has basically been beaten down and defeated by all the other houses. I mean, they're not defeated, they still have their flag, but Darrow basically shows up with this army now,
Yeah.
and he's like, hey, give me Primus, and I'll let you go. And he leaves, and we don't see Cassius again. I think this is where he builds his reputation as the Reaper,
Yes.
and not Darrow. So people just know him as the Reaper,
Yes.
and then eventually I think the connection's made that Darrow's still alive, and that's him.
Yeah, so up until then, people still think Darrow's probably dead, but the Reaper is around, and he's going around reaping.
Yeah.
And so he's, like, taking charge over these places. He's conquering them, but not making them slaves. He's just he's saying, fight on my side. And I'm not going to treat you like a slave. And then if you win that place for me, guess what? You get charge of that house. And so they're like, oh, wow, we want to fight for him.
Yeah.
And through all this stuff, eventually, I believe he captures Mars, like you were saying. And then they say, okay, well, now we have to go over these other houses. Because ultimately, it has to come down to just one house remaining.
Yeah.
Darrow is aware of the fact that people are watching him, and they don't want him to win.
Yeah.
And he also knows that the Jackal is Nero's son. And that, so basically, you have the Reaper and you've got Jackal. Right, you've got these two different people who are these like very big forces who are kind of taking over everything, and they got to collide with one another. And so what Darrow does is he makes this announcement. He makes sure that everybody's got their rings on and whatnot, and he says, "Hey, we're going to go after. I think it's Jupiter." And he's like, "Okay, we're going to go after Jupiter." And you don't know why he goes out of the way to say that, but he goes there, and whenever they get to this place, there's only like 6 or 7 people there. This very scrawny boy walks out and he says, we surrender. We don't want to do this. Like, we've been starving for all this time. And he comes out, and typically what they do is they'd enslave the people for a little bit.
And make them prove themselves.
Yeah, make them prove themselves. He says, like, if you go conquer that house for me, you'll no longer be our slaves.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do. Well, these guys, Darrow says, you know what? No. Since you just surrendered to me without a fight, you don't have to be a slave. And so they go into the house and they start partying. Right? And they're like, okay, everybody drink, yada, yada, yada. And all the people from Mars, they're like laying down and they're drunk. And so Darrow, he sits down with this scrawny kid. And he starts talking to him. And he's just saying, okay, well, tell me about your backstory. And the guy goes on this long thing, just like talking about himself. And then he starts asking Darrow, well, tell me your backstory. And Darrow's very vague. And then what happens?
Darrow actually knows that this is the Jackal.
Yeah, because Mustang comes in at one point.
Yeah.
And this is going to be significant later.
And
because Mustang walks in from she was doing like a scouting mission, working on like another battle. She comes in and she sees Darrow sitting across from this guy, and she has this really alarmed look.
Yeah.
And then Darrow's like, hey, go get this out. There's this guy named Pax, right? He says, go find Pax. Pax is on a scouting mission. You go check on him. And then Mustang leaves, and you're thinking, what was that look about? Right? And so
he had realized before that.
Well, yes.
Yeah, it's like
I said that because there's something significant about it later.
Right, yeah. So she does kind of... She knows who the Jackal is somehow, and he sees that she does.
Yeah. As the audience, you're wondering, what was that look about?
Yeah. And he knew the whole time this was his plan, and he finds, his army was actually not getting drunk. He had pretended, because he figured this was the Jackal, and that he had some kind of army somewhere.
And that's why he mentioned we're going to this house, because he knew the proctors were listening, and he knew that they wanted him dead.
Yeah.
And so if he said he was going to this place, they were going to make sure the Jackal was there before him, so that the Jackal could kind of sneak in. So that's why, once again, you have Darrow being very clever, and he's thinking ahead. He says, okay, if I tell them I'm going to be there, they're going to make sure that the one person who can take me out is there.
Yeah.
And so even though he saw the scrawny kid, he knew he was the Jackal. And so they're just talking to each other. Darrow pulls out his sword, like his knife, and just stabs it through the kid's hand. And the kid, at first he's in pain, and then he just kind of calms.
Yeah, he's kind of scared by his how calm he is about
Darrow's whoa, how did you just calm yourself? And he's like, oh, so how long did you know I was the Jackal? And they start talking back and forth. Darrow's trying to, play hardball.
He makes a mistake here. He underestimates the Jackal.
Yeah, because he says, you know what? I could kill you right now, but if you saw off your own hand...
Yeah, he says a Jackal. He says the Jackal will, eat its own leg or something to escape or something. He's like... If you want to escape that badly, cut off your own hand. Yeah,
and so he thinks, obviously, nobody's going to cut off their own hand.
Yeah. Well, he thinks he's gold, so he's very prideful and vain and honorable. He's not going to do that. So.
Yeah. But the Jackal does it.
Yeah.
he's like, oh, I can go free? And, Darrow, he can't go back on his word. And he's like, there's no way this guy's going to do it. Well, sure enough.
I don't remember if he uses the Proctor's weapon or his own or something. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But he ends up killing Pax.
Yeah, there's a guy named Pax Artelamanus. Yeah. He says his name a lot.
So Pax is like a family childhood friend of Mustangs, and they're close, and he was kind of taunting the Jackal beforehand, and so the Jackal kills him.
Yeah, and then he escapes, right? So he cuts off his own arm, kills Pax, he escapes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Darrow's whole plan is kind of unfolding here.
Yeah.
He's like, what am I going to do?
And then they decide, hey, we can't win against the Proctors because they're helping him. So then they go storm Olympus. And so they actually go to Olympus because I think he knocks out Fitchner or something. Fitchner comes and visits, and he him
and Fitchner kind of have like a truce.
Yeah.
When they're talking to each other, he's like, you know what, I didn't think you had the guts in you. And he's like, thanks, man, I appreciate it. Then he just knocks him out.
Fitchner keeps telling him, like, hey, you're already going to get this really good job or whatever after you graduate. Don't stop trying. Just let the Jackal win, you know? You've already done good. But he's like, no, like, I need to show that someone can't win through cheating. Like we're going to win this. So he knocks out Fitchner, and he takes his grav boots, which are what they use to fly around, and they use those to go to Olympus, which is this area that they can't normally get to, that all the Proctors are at, and they actually attack the Proctors.
Yes,
and,
big twist.
They capture all of them, and Darrow actually kills Jupiter, I think, is the one who fights, because he's just, like, he wants to kill Darrow, so he fights him, and
and so this is unprecedented, right? Never in the history of the Institute has this happened.
Yeah. But
Darrow is leading an all-right rebellion, not against just the students, but against the Proctors, who are typically, you know, they're supposed to be just the eyes in the sky, uninvolved.
Right.
But basically all of them have been corrupted. They've all been kind of paid off, except for Fitchner.
No, I think Fitchner was helping them, but he wasn't getting paid for it.
No, that's what I'm saying, except for Fitchner.
Yeah.
And so basically Darrow goes in there, and they just overtake Olympus.
Yeah. So it's a huge win. They get all this armor and pulse weapons, and then they're going to take the fight to the Jackal. So he sends Mustang after the Jackal. Okay, but it's after this, I think he, because Fitchner's there with them, he learns from Fitchner, hey, she's the twin sister of the Jackal. They're both, you know.
And that's a good twist. That's like, you're like, oh, whoa, what?
Yeah.
And so finally you realize why she made that weird look whenever she walked in.
And he's really scared now. It's like, hey, I just sent an ally of the Jackal to go capture the Jackal. Now she's going to join forces with him and defeat me. Yeah,
and he's over here feeling really betrayed also, because he's like, man, I really like this girl. Yeah, this is messed up.
They bonded and they got along well.
Yeah.
And so they set up and they go face him because he thinks, you know, this is over for me. I'm going to do what I can to try and win. And then Mustang comes out with him gagged and bound and no clothes on. And they win because...
the Jackal has no clothes on.
Yeah.
The Mustang has clothes on.
Yeah, no, the
That'd
Jackal.
be a different ending.
Yeah, so she captures the Jackal for him, and they win.
Yeah, and she's like, "Did you not trust me? Oh, ye of little faith." Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? Like, do you think that I kissed you for nothing? Like,
well, I think it does say that she did understand, because she hadn't told him who she was in her relationship. But we kind of see that Darrow's having a hard time trusting any Golds because, you know, he's actually a Red. And so he knows eventually anyone that he may ally with now, it's going to be tough for them to be his ally once they know that he's actually a Red trying to topple their society.
Yeah. And so the book concludes with Darrow winning the Institute. And, you know, everybody arrives to congratulate one another. And you have Nero Augustus himself, the arch-governor, the one who killed his wife. He comes up to Darrow, and obviously this is the Jackal and Mustang's father.
The guy that killed Darrow's wife, not his own wife.
Yeah. Sorry. So the arch-governor who killed Darrow's wife, and who's also the Jackal and Mustang's father, he comes up to Darrow, and he kind of, you know, gets onto him for a little bit, and he says, hey, you're supposed to let my son win, and Darrow's like, yeah, and I know that you paid people to make it so that your son would win, and so how about this? You don't mention... you know,
that I did all that.
So they basically broker this deal where Darrow's like, I won't tell anybody that you cheated.
Yeah.
I won't tell anybody about any of the messed up stuff you did. And then the governor's like, I kind of like you.
Yeah.
I could use a guy like you. He says, like, what if I took you in to be kind of like part of my family?
Yeah, and that's the thing that, like, he's so full of power that he doesn't even respect Darrow in this because he kind of... Like, if Darrow did have an actual Gold family, he's basically having to leave his family name behind to join his. So, but the joke's on him because Darrow doesn't actually have a real family.
Exactly.
So, he's not really giving up much. But basically, Nero thinks he's so powerful, like, I'm going to make you join my family, abandon your family name to join me, but I'll do this for you. And
Darrow's over here thinking, wow, this is going a lot better than I could have ever thought.
Wow, this is exactly what my goal was.
Yeah, in the spur of a moment, he's like, wow, I mean... Do I do this? Because he's trying to think. He realizes, you mentioned earlier how the Augustus family and the Bologna family, they don't like each other. And so he realizes that if he swears himself to allegiance to Augustus, well, now he's putting himself and even further enmity with the Bologna family. Because first off, he already killed one of their kids. Cassius tried to kill him, and he just, like, you know, kind of destroyed all that stuff. So the Bolognas already don't like Darrow.
Yeah.
And that ultimately ends up being the thing that makes Darrow make this decision. Because he realizes if he had a chance with making it with the Bolognas, he's kind of already wasted that chance.
I was also really excited. It kind of comes up, but he's really excited because
more Mustang?
He's going to be there with Mustang.
Yeah, he's like, I get to hang out with her more? Yeah. All right, I'll take that.
I think he actually asked Nero, is like, will you tell me to stay away from your daughter? He's like, oh, no, I don't care about that.
Actually, well, that's really funny when that happened, because he's like, do I have to go stay away from her? And he's like, no.
I think it's interesting because you really see, like, what the society of the Golds is about so much different things than we are, because to us, like, there would be honor and, like, purity and stuff like that.
Yeah, the only thing they care about is power.
Power. So whatever gives him power, and him being with his daughter doesn't change his power, so he doesn't care. So, like, the priorities of the Gold are a lot different than what we consider nowadays to be important.
Yeah, so basically Augustus, he just, like, disowns the Jackal.
Yeah.
He says, you're a loser now, so go away.
He supported him, and as soon as he found out he lost, he doesn't care about him anymore.
So he just beelines to the winner.
And we'll see that with Nero and a lot of Golds in the future books. Yeah. They go with whoever's the most powerful, and they abandon and leave behind whoever's not.
Yep. And so the book finishes with Darrow kneeling down before Nero Augustus, the man who killed Darrow's wife. And, you know, Nero saying, "Rise, my son, rise." And therefore, red is rising.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the whole story there. Pretty in-depth recap of it. Do you have anything else you want to talk about there?
If I were not a Christian, I think that this is how I would want to be. Like, this is getting very theological, but I think
Welcome to the channel.
I would be like a Gold. You know, I'd want to be a Gold. Why not? Like, why not do what gives you power and puts you the highest if you're not a Christian? Like, so I think that this makes sense with a godless world.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is with their society is they've made it so, like, there's not civil war. There's actually hardly any. I mean, there is some like battling and stuff, but
skirmishes. Yeah.
In the end, like, problems are caused because of what Darrow does. Everything's kind of in an order. So I think even though, like, there's injustice, there's the people that are basically slaves, we don't see, like, a lot of conflict, and that's, like, kind of an ideal world. Like, that's what we strive for, right? We want peace, and they have peace. It's just it comes at what cost.
Well, I think it's funny because inherently, I mean, this is, like I said, this is not a religious book. It's not a Christian book. I don't know the religious beliefs of the author, but the obvious perspective is that we're supposed to side with Darrow in realizing that things are not the way they should be, right? So even if, like, we might think, oh, you know, that would be all right, we realize it's not all right. And we realize things should not, like, you shouldn't just be objectifying these people. You shouldn't be just forming this caste system where these people are in this thing. There's no, like, dream of ever changing.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just put people in those positions regardless of, like, free will or anything, right? Like you said, without a Christian perspective, or maybe before we even get there, without a religious perspective, we have no reason for thinking that's wrong. Because if everything came from nothing, and if you just... You know, if you weren't created by God and you did not have the image of God in you, I have no reason to respect you as a person.
Yeah.
I have no reason to value you. I have no reason to treat you as anything more than an object.
Especially if you're physically and mentally stronger than anybody else, why would you not be the highest? Like, you have the power and authority over those people. Like, that's the way you are.
Yeah.
So why not do that?
The reason I value people is because I realize that they were created in the image of God and that God went out of his way to craft these people for his purposes. And so I realize these people, they're worthy to be valued, honored, loved, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I treat people the way I do. That's why I want to love people. That's why I'm so troubled by the system of the book. But if you don't believe in God, I see no reason why you would think this is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think it's funny because even though this isn't a religious book, it admits to something that really only religious people who believe that people were created in the image of God, only they can really explain and rationalize, right? I think inherently we all recognize it.
Yeah, I think anyone who read this book would say that this is not a good system. Like, people should not be in slavery. But I think as Christians we can realize, like, the reason we inherently believe that is because we have a God who created us in his image to think that way. Like, that's the way we're wired. Because
even if, like, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying here, even if you are an atheist, I think that you recognize that there is a right way and wrong way to treat people. You realize that people have value. You realize that people should be honored. But the thing is, can you justify where those beliefs come from?
Yeah, what reason do you have for believing that if you don't believe in God who set up that system?
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting because you realize the whole premise of the book does not work if this system is correct.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to buy into it. You're going to be like, why mess up what's already perfect?
Right, right.
So the whole premise rests on the fact that this society is wrong. Which is only true if there is a God who created people in his image. If everybody just came from nothing, the only thing I should be doing is seeking my own self-interest, in which case, why not become a gold? Why not become a peerless Scard who just rules over everybody?
Yeah.
So I do think that's very interesting.
You basically become the God. So whoever's the most powerful is the God.
Exactly. So very interesting stuff there. Very good social commentary. Stuff to be wary of in our own system. We want to be aware of how we treat people. We want to recognize that we don't want to be, especially like in our culture, right? If you're sitting there, you're watching this video, you're probably just sitting in your room, holding your phone in your hand, sitting at your laptop.
You're like, my hand's tired. It's been an hour and a half.
Yeah, you're probably over there thinking, oh, I'm such a red. I'm like the lowest. You're probably not. No, realize this. There are people out in the world who they don't know where they're getting their next meal. They don't know if they'll live to see another day. Right? They have to strive day after day after day, working and working and working. Whereas we get to sit here and we get to record hour-long videos about a book we read.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and we know that we all have, some people are more talented than others in certain things, and we know that that's not from our own thing. God made us that way. God gave us those abilities, and that's why we are to be called to be humble about it. Yeah. We're not to lord that power over other people.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think that's just something to be aware of. I don't think that when we read this book, we should leave thinking, man, I'm a red. Yeah. I think ideally we should leave questioning, man, am I a gold? Like, because you look at their society and you realize, man, I mean, they've got a whole lot that they take for granted. Yeah. But a lot of times, I mean, especially in American
I would
society,
say there's some like admirable qualities about the golds. Like they have some things that I think we should strive for, like that we don't. But obviously, the majority of the way they use it is what's corrupt.
No, and I like that the author doesn't make it just a black and white thing. Yeah. It's very easy to do that, but he highlights the pros, he highlights the cons about all the systems. He talks about the bad things about reds, he talks about the good things about golds, and the reds are supposed to be kind of the good people, and the golds are supposed to be the bad people, but you get to see the goods and bads of all of them, and I think that's good, because it makes you, or it should make you, sometimes we can just get lost in the world and be like, oh, we just read the story, but ideally, I think, maybe it's because I like writing, I think the goal of the author is to make you leave and question, how do I treat people? Like, how do I live life? You know, what's my perspective on things? Did I see in myself the bad traits of the reds, the bad traits of the golds, the good traits? Like, where would I fall in this? And that's why I asked the question at the beginning, like, what color would you be? Yeah. Because, really, I think it's a good question to ask. And I think it's interesting how we have a tough time deciding. Because ultimately, we're not just one of those things. We have different aspects of it. Yeah. And that's because God created us that way. And you want to
be, like, the best, but you also don't want to be, like, the person, like, oppressing everybody. You know? Like, so ideally, you want to be a gold because you want to aspire to be the best that you can be. But you don't want to be the bad guy either. So it's kind of tough. You know?
Yeah, the question is, why do you want to be the best, right?
One other really cool thing I liked about the book is Darrow learns this over time. But he realizes that there's even good people among golds. And just because we have been treated poorly doesn't mean we should go kill all the golds. Like, we should treat everyone the same. So there's some people like Titus and people in other books will see that they don't care for the lives of gold, just like the golds don't care about the lives of other colors. But the whole thing is about, it needs to be more than that. We all need to be on the same field, like we're all important, and we shouldn't just go kill the other color, the golds because of what they've done to us. We need to be better than them. So like, let's not treat them the same just because we've been treated that way. That doesn't justify treating them the same. Yeah. So,
and my favorite scene of the entire book is the scene, we haven't mentioned it yet, where there's this guy named Tactus. And he has been going around doing very similar things to what Titus had done earlier. You know, Titus, he was the guy who got killed because he was raping people and mistreating them. Yeah. Well, Tactus, he's another gold, and he's been raping people and mistreating them. And there's this issue where, you know, they just conquered this group, and Tactus has been mistreating them. And Mustang comes up to Darrow and says, hey, there needs to be some sort of justice. It's like a hard decision for Darrow. Yeah. Right? He's put in this place where it's like, okay, it makes it almost seem unjust if he doesn't punish him, because then it seems like he's showing favoritism, and then the people that they just conquered are going to turn against him. But if he's too harsh, well, then it's like
people are going to follow.
Then the others are going to turn against
people
him.
People that follow tactics.
Yes. And so,
and I thought it was interesting. It makes this decision even harder. He's like, "Hey, I'll just ask the girl that he raped what I should do to him, because then it's her decision. It's not mine. I'll just say this is what she wanted." And she's like, "I don't want you to do anything to him."
Yeah. And so it makes it hard to where he's put in the situation. It's like a catch-22. If he just supports Tactus, doesn't punish him, the people who are against Tactus, they're going to turn on him. If he punishes Tactus and kills him, the people who support Tactus are going to turn on him. And so ultimately, what Darrow does is he decides to flog Tactus, right? And he gives him lashings, and he gives him a certain amount. And Tactus, he's like, he's acting smug. He's like, "Oh, this is stupid." And then
he's like, he's kind of like, "I'm gonna get revenge."
Yeah,
like, there's gonna be
there's gonna be payback
results.
And then what Darrow does is he takes off his shirt and he hands Tactus the whip, and he says, "Now, you get to do the same thing to me."
I think he says double.
So he says, "I want y'all to know that as the leader of this group, I am responsible for every evil that is done. And so if he has gone around doing these things, then I deserve twice as much." And so he says, "Tactus, you get to flog me."
And he says anyone who does this kind of thing in the future, you're not going to get punished. I'm going to get punished.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like the person they're following, their leader. And this might be where you're going. I don't know. But it's kind of interesting because that's how we can think about our relationship with Christ. If you're a Christian...
you knew that, bro.
Yeah. Our actions aren't only punishments, aren't our fault. Like, Jesus died on the cross for our sins. So every time you sin, every time you do something wrong, that's put on Jesus.
You're adding to the weight of the nails, yeah. And when Jesus came to earth, he said, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to lay down his life as ransom for many." So my favorite thing here is, once again, it's not a religious book. It's not a Christian book. But right here, we see this. To me, this is the highlight of Darrow's whole leadership, because this is where you see he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
Because he still punished Tactus, and all the people who supported Tactus, they're not liking it. I mean, he didn't kill him, but he says, "You know what? I'm still gonna there's still gonna be justice." But then he says, "You're gonna put the brunt of it on me." And so he actually lays himself down, and he puts the weapon in the hand of the enemy, and he says, "Give me your best." And he's sore and he's aching, and to me it just reminded me, I was like, that's why the story of the gospel is so appealing, because Jesus, he did nothing wrong, but he said, "You know what? Even though you're the one who did something wrong, I'm going to take the brunt of the force." Yeah. And and that's why, people really, they get on to Christians because they think that sometimes we might fall into this whole salvation by works thing. But whenever we want to do good things, whenever I'm talking about why we should care for others, it's not because I'm trying to earn salvation from God. It's because I'm grateful for what he's done. It's exactly like what Darrow is doing with these people. We were once slaves to sin. Like Darrow, Jesus, he set us free. And so I'm committed to him. I just want to live for him. And so that's my whole thing. I look at this, and whenever I read Darrow doing this, I'm like, that's exactly what Jesus did. Yeah. I mean, not to the same extent. Jesus literally laid his life down, and he took on all our sin. That's way bigger than anything Darrow did. But
I think he did use the Bible as reference, because I think even Mustang calls him Messiah.
Yes, he does. Yes,
he does. I think we
Messiah.
very clearly see that distinction. Yeah. I actually hadn't made that connection, but I think that's why he did that.
Yeah, that's why it was my favorite scene. And it's the scene that stuck out to me the most as I was listening to it on audio. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's straight up Jesus.
You kind of see, because this is after Darrow has joined Mustang, and she's kind of changed his perspective. So you see a giant shift in the way Darrow thinks about things. Yep. He's changed his mind, and he's no longer just about vengeance and getting revenge on people. He is now doing this, where he sees leadership is laying yourself down for the people that follow you and sacrificing for the people you care about and the people below you. Yep. You're not treating them like slaves. You're being a leader and sacrificing yourself so that they follow you. Yep. And that's a better way of getting people to follow you than oppression and slavery and all that stuff.
For sure. So, yeah, but there you go. There is our very long and in-depth review of Red Rising. If you have read it, comment below and let us know. And we will eventually be back with what will probably be a much shorter video on the second book, Golden Sun. Until then, I am David.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest About Movies. See y'all next time.
Bye.